Cold case detectives who work on scary unsolved cases usually rely on witnesses from the time that the crime was committed, as well as any other evidence that was collected. But with new forensic technologies emerging, cases with disturbing backstories are now being solved at a much higher rate, revealing the true scary nature of the culprits that committed these crimes. Number 5. Cold cases are very often solved using new DNA technology, such as genetic genealogy, where the DNA from family members is used to track down a suspect or a victim. But one unsolved robbery case from 2007 is now finally solved thanks to a more archaic forensic technique. In November of 2007, a man entered the First Commonwealth Bank in Youngwood, Pennsylvania, with the aim of committing a robbery. He handed the teller a note that read, quote, "Nobody will get hurt if you give me the hundreds and fifties now." The teller did as the note instructed, and the man fled on foot, making his escape with about $2,000 in cash, accidentally leaving the note with the teller, who handed it over to police investigators. When the note was processed, 3 fingerprints were found and matched a 34-year-old man named Scott Geckel. Geckel, however, denied any involvement in the robbery, and with no further evidence, no charges were filed against him, and he was set free. Police suspected that Geckel had been involved in another robbery, in which a firearm and ash were stolen from an apartment, and when they questioned his former girlfriend, she stated that while they were still in a relationship, Geckel admitted that he had indeed been involved in the crime. The case went cold until 5 years later, when the note was handed over to a handwriting analyst from the State Police Library in Harrisburg, and it was found that the handwriting on the note perfectly matched with Geckel's. It was then found that Geckel was already serving time at the Lancaster County Jail for a bank robbery that he had committed there. In that case, Geckel was being held in lieu of a $500,000 bond, and with the added charges from the 2007 robbery, it's likely he'll be spending a long time in prison. Number 4. An unsolved case from 2005 left investigators in Wayne, New Jersey baffled when no suspects could be identified in a home invasion robbery that took place in 2015. But thanks to new investigative techniques, face-to-face interviews, and fingerprint analysis, it's no longer an unsolved mystery. 3 men were arrested in connection with the crime, namely 22-year-old William J. Tarzan Mariano from Wayne, 27-year-old Alexander Roller Juarez from Patterson, and 23-year-old Aaron Valdivieso, also from Patterson. After their arrest, it was discovered that the 3 men had originally planned to execute their robbery at the house of a man in Pines Lake who was involved with illegal substances. But they mistakenly went to the wrong address. When they entered the house, they found that it belonged to a family who had no involvement with their intended target. But they decided to ransack the house, stealing electronics and wrapped Christmas presents that belonged to the family. While the robbery was underway, the 3 suspects threatened the family and held them captive with a firearm before fleeing the scene. Mariano was arrested in the Washington Heights area of Manhattan on the 11th of October 2018 by detectives from the Wayne and New York City police departments. Roller Juarez was arrested by the local county sheriff's office warrant squad at his house in Patterson on the 18th of October, and Valdivieso was also taken into custody at his house in Patterson. All 3 men were charged with conspiracy to commit robbery, armed robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, theft, simple assault, and 2 counts of kidnapping. A female accomplice who has not been named was also taken into custody in connection with the robbery, and she received the same charges as her accomplices. It's not known what their sentences were, but in 2021, Roller Juarez was arrested again after it was found that he had nearly $25,000 worth of illegal substances in his possession. Number 3. The scary mystery of a crime that was committed in Arizona in 1989 has finally been solved 33 years later after a 58-year-old man from Colorado was found to be responsible. On the 16th of October, 1989, 22-year-old Susan Mary Morse failed to show up for work, causing her parents to become concerned. They contacted the police and requested that a welfare check be carried out. Upon arrival at Susan's apartment, located in Mesa, they found that she was lying deceased on her bed covered with her bed linens. With no suspect and no clear evidence at the scene, the case seemed destined to remain an unsolved mystery. In November of the following year, police received a report that another break-in had occurred at the same apartment complex. But in this case, the victim survived after her attacker stole cash and a VCR. DNA found at the scene was entered into the FBI's CODIS system, but with no result. In 2015, investigators attempted to use familial DNA testing in case a relative of the culprit had submitted their DNA, but again, they were unable to find a match. Susan's case went cold for more than 3 decades, until a new investigation was undertaken, in which it was found that a man named Thomas Cox may have been involved. Cox's mother had lived next door to Susan at the time that her life was taken. At the time, Cox wasn't considered a suspect, but when Cox became a person of interest, his Colorado Springs house was staked out by investigators. During this time, they were able to collect a styrofoam cup, straw, and lid from his trash to compare to DNA samples collected in 1989. After the cup was tested, it was found to be a match for the DNA from the crime scene. Added to that, a fingerprint from a window screen from an earlier crime was also matched to Cox, and his fate was sealed. Unfortunately, Susan's father, William, passed away in 1999, and her mother, Tilly, passed away in 2013 before they could learn that Susan's case had been solved. Cox had his initial arraignment hearing on the 29th of April 2022, and his trial is currently ongoing, but it's certain that he will be spending a long time behind bars, thanks to the ever-evolving forensic techniques used by law enforcement agencies. Number 2. On the 28th of February 1974, 39-year-old James Bednarik from Salt Lake City was on his way home from work when his life was ended by someone who was lying in wait at his house. When investigators arrived at the scene, they had very little to go on, but they soon learned that Bednarik was known to sell stolen gasoline, and they suspected that it may have played a factor in his demise. They also learned that Bednarik had gotten into an argument with the gas station owner sometime earlier. The argument was over stolen gas, and in that incident, Bednarik produced a firearm, which he attacked the owner of the gas station with. But despite these leads, investigators were no closer to solving the strange but true case. No suspects were identified, and the case went cold. But the case was reopened in 2022, thanks to a coincidence that saw the case finally solved. This came about when a retired Unified Police Department detective had lunch with a retired Salt Lake City detective. As they ate, they started to discuss the case, and one of them remembered that a man named George B. Toone had confessed to ending the lives of 2 men in Salt Lake City in the 1970s. He then remembered that Toone had also admitted to ending the life of a man on the orders of a gas station owner who had been attacked by the victim with a firearm. They then requested that the Salt Lake City crime lab run Toone's DNA as a comparison to 2 latent fingerprints that had been found at the crime scene in 1974. Surprisingly, they were found to be a match, and Toone was finally identified as Bednarik's killer. It was a hollow victory, however, as it was then discovered that Toone had passed away from natural causes in San Bernardino, California, on the 11th of September 2011. It was also found that if he were still alive, there was enough evidence to convict Toone of another crime that was committed on the 28th of October 1978. In that case, 47-year-old William Erkenbrecht's life was ended with a firearm as he was opening the gate to his ranch. The modus operandi in each case was found to be strikingly similar, with Toone lying in wait about 30 feet before firing the shot. Another investigation is currently underway to determine whether or not Toon was responsible for ending the life of another Salt Lake City man, and if found to be true, who the victim was in that case. Investigators have asked that anyone with information on that case contact the Salt Lake City Police at 801-779-3000. Number 1. Although many unsolved cases are closed thanks to new technologies available to law enforcement agencies, there are some occasions where a break in the case comes thanks to witnesses that were present at the time that the crime was committed, many years earlier. On the 25th of March, 1990, 71-year-old John Carl Burkhart from Fontana, California, failed to show up for breakfast with one of his friends. When the friend traveled to his house on Mango Avenue to check on him, he was found deceased in his living room. Despite receiving multiple leads that were all followed up on, police were unable to identify a suspect, and the case quickly went cold. That is until 2003, when a witness came forward 13 years after the crime had been committed to say that she was present in Burkhart's house at the time that the crime was committed. The witness told investigators that a man named Michael Joseph Vance had asked her to accompany him to pick up his paycheck from Burkhart. While in the process of doing so, an argument broke out between the two men, as Vance accused Burkhart of owing him money. Vance managed to grab a sharpened blade from Burkhart's kitchen, and he proceeded to attack him with it, ending his life in the process. The witness and Vance then proceeded to steal valuables from the home before making their escape. During the investigation that was conducted in 1990, evidence technicians were able to collect several items of evidence from the crime scene, including fingerprints that had been left by the attacker. More prints were also found on the blade that was used in the attack and left behind at the scene. When Vance was brought in for questioning, he stated that he had never met Burkhart. He denied ever working for him and maintained that he had never been inside of his house. He also claimed that he was innocent of the accusations against him. This was, of course, untrue, as his DNA and fingerprints were found at the scene, and charges of murder, involuntary manslaughter, and the use of a dangerous or deadly weapon were brought against him. Vance decided to accept a plea deal for voluntary manslaughter, and he is being held at Valley State Prison in Chowchilla, California, where he'll be serving consecutive sentences for another unrelated crime that he was found to be responsible for. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knott, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.